Hello and welcome to Hobson UMC on YouTube. I am VHD Jr, the lead pastor here at Hobson, and we are delighted that you have tuned in to hear us today and the conversation that I have with my son Trey. It is an opportunity for me to reflect upon the message for Sunday, August the 21st. August is getting away from us. It is the 12th Sunday after Pentecost, and I am delighted that you would spend some of your time with us. We know that in this time where people are getting busy, even though we are still at home, we're still worshiping. Just a few of us are just gathering here at the church. So it's an opportunity for us to be able to share with you. And it's our hope that there is something that's said that will both challenge you and comfort you in the times that we're in. And there are a lot of places that and a lot of opportunities for you to listen. But we are so delighted that you have chosen us as one of the shows that you would listen to. A very important time always in the worship experience or any gathering experience we have at Hobson is to share with one another those celebrations and those concerns that are upon our hearts, that we share with one another because we also share them with God. And while we look to God for the answers and we look to God to give thanks, it is always important for us to share that in the context of community. As we come this day, we continue to ask you to be in prayer for those who are part of this community who are still dealing with grief and the loss of the loved ones. And while there are those who are dealing with grief, we also celebrate the lives of those who have gone, and knowing that they blessed our lives, they enriched our lives in very special ways. And so we're just thankful for that, but we continue to offer up prayers. I want to ask for very special prayers for those of whom grief has become their identity in this time of being isolated from and practicing distancing from one another. A lot of people are dealing with grief alone, and so we offer up prayers for them on this day. Ask for prayers for both Foy and Janet DuBois. Foy, who is dealing with some health issues and has been for a year now, and Janet, who is the primary provider, healthcare provider for him, and the struggle it is not only for them but for so many in the midst of what's happening with COVID-19, trying to get support, trying to get help to come into the home. They are dealing with that, and so we just continue to pray for them. And just pray that they might have a sense of peace in the midst of all that is happening. I ask for prayers for Luana's Coleman's mother, who is at home and is recovering well, but still stands in the need of our prayers. We pray for all of our families that are dealing with going back to school, some who are back in the building, some who are not, our teachers and all of the struggle that they are having to deal with and learning in a new way. We just ask you to continue to be in prayer for them. Be in prayer for this week, a good friend of mine, Judge Allegra Walker, had a piece in the Tennessean op-ed that dealt with domestic abuse with children and the underreporting that is going. She talked about the silent cries of our children. And I just ask you to join me in praying so that we might find ways to put ourselves in a position to where we can notice our children and those who are the most vulnerable in our community, and to be able to provide them some kind of support. Then, in closing, just ask that you, this is a season of making choices, and around a lot of things, and we just ask that you be in prayer about the choices that you will make, and that you might be guided to make the right choices and for the right decisions in this time. Our musician, Chris Davis, has been dealing with some health issues, and so I want to close with asking for prayers for him. As always, if you have any special prayers that you need to have lifted up, or you just want to share with me, just give me a call, send me a text, email, however it is. We're still important, and prayer is still very much a part of the lives of this congregation. Amen. This week, the 12th Sunday after Pentecost, the gospel lesson for this week comes from Matthew's Gospel, the 16th chapter, and the epistle comes from Romans, the 12th. I'm not going to read all of that. I'm just going to read one verse from the Romans 12, and we'll be reading verse 2, but I'll read that after we hear verses 13 through 20 from Matthew's Gospel, the 16th chapter. Now, when Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the human one is?" They reply, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." Jesus said, "And what about you? Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Then Jesus replied, "Happy are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because no human has shown this to you. Rather, God who is in heaven has shown you. I tell you that Peter, I'll build my church on this rock. The gates of the underworld won't be able to stand against it. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Anything you fasten on earth will be fastened in heaven, and anything you loose on earth will be loose in heaven." Then he ordered the disciples not to tell anybody that he was the Christ. And now Romans 12:2. Don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you can figure out what God's will is, what is good and pleasing and mature. Amen. Trey, after we have dealt with the miracles for the last few weeks, it is a good change for us to have this passage that does not deal with miracles or outstanding acts by Jesus. But I do believe it is probably one of the most significant passages in all of Matthew's Gospel, because there are some important questions that Jesus asks in this passage. And it leads to, I think, some important questions that we must ask of ourselves. I think it's interesting, first of all, that the conversation that takes place is that it takes place in Caesarea Philippi. Now, this is about 25 miles from the Sea of Galilee, where most of Jesus' activities are taking place, and it's kind of the center of his ministry. This is 25 miles, and if we had to think about Caesarea Philippi, it is kind of the urban setting. It is the place where all of the action kind of takes place. People used to say it was kind of like Las Vegas is or was. Now, in this day and time, where those kind of activities that take place are happening everywhere. We don't relate it to it, but it is a place where a lot of activity is going on. And there are all kinds of people that are there, all kinds of acts that are, all kind of immoral things are going on, all kinds of corruption and things. And it is in the midst of this setting that Jesus chooses to ask the disciples as they're having the kind of time of conversation, time of reflection, that he asks them, who is it that the people say that I am? And then the disciples give him, kind of the standard answers, and some say that it's, John the Baptist. Some say that you're or Elijah. Some say one of the prophets, maybe Jeremiah, or just one of the prophets. Those are kind of the safe answers, and I think it's kind of interesting for us to kind of look at those responses and why people would have done that. I mean, they would have known that John the Baptist had been beheaded, but yet they would have thought that he would have come back. And many of the things that he was doing and the language that he was taking, the way that he was confronting the systems and the structures, was in fact reminding them of John the Baptist. And then when they think of Elijah, I mean, we know that Elijah kind of disappeared and just kind of, just went away, and people have been anticipating, in particular Jews that have been anticipating his return. And so for them, it is Elijah that has come back because he has these great words of wisdom, this great word of inspiration. And then for others, because he was such a tremendous teacher, and I think we forget that sometimes about Jesus, is that, we focus in on the healing and the acts of ministry and the conversation and the presence that he has, that we forget about the great teaching that he has. And so when he asks this question, they're getting into it and they're offering up those answers to him. And I don't know why they did not, figure out, that Jesus always had a way of having a setup. He would ask one thing, knowing that it is an important question that he's going to ask. But he gets them in this kind of comfortable mood, and he asks them, who do others say that I am? And it gives them an opportunity to be able to really ask the question. And I, Trey, when I think about it, for most of us, when we would much rather talk about what others say. I mean, we love that language, they say. So in case we say something that might be the wrong answer, we don't have to take blame for that answer. We can say, oh, well, they said it. And then after they go through this, these kind of responses, then Jesus turns to them and asks them a very important question. And Jesus says to them, but who do you say that I am? Now, as always, when we look at, when we're reading, the Jesus story, and Peter is present, always Peter just kind of, pops in and gives a response. And he says in that, you are, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You are the one. And Jesus responds, you have given the right answer. But you didn't get that answer on your own. That is an answer that was given to you by God. I really kind of wish that, to some degree, maybe Matthew would have shared some of the other kinds of responses that the others had. We don't hear their voices, and maybe the reason we don't hear their voices is because they found themselves a lot like we find ourselves. That when we're asked that very direct question from Jesus, who do you say that I am? As I say, we're comfortable with giving those very cliche kind of answers, those things that we heard, those answers that we heard growing up, in the church. He is, is this, he is that. But Jesus asked the question, And I think it's not a question that was only limited to them, but I think it's a question that all of us at some point and sometime, that if we're going to consider ourselves followers of Jesus Christ, we must ask that question. But regardless, even if we're going to be followers of Jesus Christ, we have to ask that question: who do we say that he is? Now, Trey, I believe that in order for us to really answer that question, that it really invites us to look at three other things, and the first is that we have to really take a look at who we are. For I believe that our relationship and what really Jesus is asking them in this very intimate setting is, what's our relationship? What do you think about me? And before we can come to some decision about what we think about Jesus or what we think about anybody else, is that we have to have some grounding of what it is that we think about ourselves. Because when we are called into community, and that's what Jesus is calling them into and calling them into relationship, I am a firm believer that we enter into relationships with people, with communities, because we have a need for something that we think that they offer that helps us to be better people of whom we are. That if we need something, we look for that in the person that we are. And so we have to have, in my opinion, an understanding of who we are. And I think all along in this, by this time they've been together a couple of years, he has been challenging them not only to be able to look at him, but he's been challenging them to look at themselves. And I think this word challenges us to be able to look at this word. And then after we kind of figure out what it is that we need or who we are, then I think we have to look at what it is that we need from Jesus. It always, interests me when people give these very, stock answers about Jesus, and you'll hear, oh, he is a lawyer, in the courtroom. He is a doctor in a sick room, And you'll hear people who've never been in a courtroom saying he is a lawyer. I mean, well, you don't need a lawyer. You've never been in that kind of situation, or you're not ill, and you're not. But I think once we realize who we are, then I think we do go to Jesus to help us in those moments, and to particularly help those in those moments of where we know that we are weak and we need strength. And we look for Jesus, and we look for the one who is, who offers himself to us to help us to get to a place of where we are a better at who we think we are, whom we believe that we are. And then finally, I think the question that comes after we realize that is that then, who do people think that we are? See, it's one thing to be able to have, this relationship and to have this confidence in ourselves, or to think who we are. And then it's one thing to say that we have this in Jesus, and we look to Jesus to kind of help, complete us, to fulfill us, to make us whole when we think we're broken, to make us strong when we think we're weak. But if others don't see that, then I would question whether or not we have been honest in our assessment of ourselves and been honest about the relationship that we have with Jesus. So I think all of this calls us for the examination of that. And that's why I think that's why I shared, the passage that comes from, that came from Romans, as Paul wrote to the church of Rome, that in this day and time, Paul says in writing to the church, says, I want you to not be conformed by the world, but be transformed by by Jesus. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, this kind of evaluation that we're going through. I am so afraid for the church today, and the vitality of the church, and to some degree almost the significance of the church. Because I am fearing in this day and time when so many of us are finding ourselves alone, when we're finding ourselves in the midst of the struggle and we're trying just to get along and just to make it, is that we don't want to deal with the hard work of transformation. We just want to take the easy way out and conform to the world just so we can get along. We do things, we say things, we accept things without really analyzing and seeing the impact that it has on others and the impact that it has on us. This past week, I was talking to someone, a friend of mine, of whom is at a place in their lives where they know they're in trouble. They know that they need some help, but they are unwilling to seek help because they're trying to fit in and trying to get what they think is available from the world to be able to do. And then to some degree, I share with them, I said, what you're doing is you're trying to treat the symptoms. You're not trying to treat the disease. That you're trying to get, put Band-Aids on situations and not getting to the heart of the situation. I share with them a story from a few years ago. I had a friend who was looking for employment, and every job interview they went, they had the resume. And the resume was, a great resume. They had, wonderful experiences that were going on, but they just could not seem to, to get a job, and they just came, and I, we went and we had a conversation. We were sitting down and we were talking, and I says, what's happening is you're looking for a job to help you deal with the other part of the brokenness in your life, and while I am not in HR, and I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or any of those kind of things, you just have such a depressing spirit about you that I am sure that when you go into the interviews, you're trying to get the paper to speak for you. And that's why you got in for the interview. I mean, anybody looks at your resume and look at your work experience, they would have to bring you in. But there is such a brokenness about you. There is such a despair about you that even our conversation is having to take place over, some sky, because, you're just depressing, and you need to be able to work on those other situation, the other situation that they were going to. You've got to find some happiness and some joy. And the job is not going to do that, is not going to fulfill that, because you're not going to get to the job because you can't get past the other parts of that. And so in this day and time, when we're finding ourselves isolated, when we're finding ourselves dealing with all of the stuff that's going on in the world, I think this passage comes with a very important time for us and for all of us to be able to struggle with, to move beyond just saying who Jesus is based upon what others have said, but for us to honestly deal with our own relationship with Jesus. Who do we think we are? And before we can get to the point of who Jesus is, we have to spend some time in thinking about who we are. So that's kind of, some of the things that I'm thinking about, and we'll, hope to kind of put a little better form on that for Sunday. I have to admit, in the last few weeks, as they've had this debate about playing playing football and not playing football, and people canceling the football seasons, and whether one believes that it's the right decision for those who are playing and those who are not playing. I just, for me, it's all about, one institution. I could care less whether the Power Five play or don't play. I'm not a national championship kind of person. But I am, and I think in this time, in this town, and we've had a lot that we've had to go through. But mid-October, when there is no TSU homecoming, it is going to be different, and that time of coming together and celebrating. And I know TSU homecoming is one of the great times in your life. We talked about it with Steve was here a few weeks ago, and how you all feed the masses and the multitudes on that day. What do you think about with all of this conversation? Where are you on the issue of whether they should play?
I think that they should allow the players to really make the decision on what they want to do. It's one thing for an administrator to say, we have to look out for the entire student body, the faculty, and all of that. But we're talking about playing football. We're talking about playing basketball. We're talking about playing volleyball, or whatever the case may be. And I think it should be up to the students. I mean, if I was a junior or a senior, and I am trying to make my claim to play in the NFL or the NBA, that I would want to showcase my abilities, what I worked for all off season, to get my body ready, to get my mind ready to play. I think it should be a decision of the actual players. Now, I know that that's may not be a popular opinion, but when you're talking about, doing what's best for someone else, you have to take into account their opinion about that. You can't. I would feel uncomfortable allowing you to make decisions about my life without consulting with me about it. So I think it has to be a collaborative effort between the coaches, the administration, and most importantly, the people that are playing these sports.
So let me ask you this question then. So
Sure.
If you're going to leave it up to the coaches and players,
Sure.
And everybody's interested in playing for two reasons. One, I think the revenue that comes in,
Absolutely.
and how it supports the universities and the athletic programs, and they're all interested in a championship. They're playing to try to get a championship.
Right. You play to win the game.
You play to win the game. Well, what if I am at Alabama?
Sure.
And I vote, yes, we need to play because I think we got a legitimate chance.
Sure.
And then I'm at Vanderbilt, and then I vote not to play.
Right.
I mean, you're in a conference, you're in a league. I mean, how would you handle that if certain schools, they came back in, the ACC, let's say, we're going to come in.
Well, it would be, you would forfeit those games. If you're talking about the SEC, Alabama's scheduled to play Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's like, we're not playing, then that game is forfeit. Simple.
As simple as that.
Simple as that. You forfeit the opportunity that you're not playing. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because, if from the standpoint of the player, the coach, and the administrator, if you decided, then what difference does it make if Alabama's playing Florida or Tennessee? You don't have a dog in the fight.
When I was thinking about this, and that when you were growing up, it was two things that you asked for that I didn't know why you asked for them, but I didn't have a problem when you were a kid. And one was you had some Transformers. I couldn't see the significance of it, but you wanted these Transformers. I got these Transformers. And the others were you would want these video games. Yeah. You want these video games. Now, while I did not necessarily understand the video games, the one thing that I appreciated when I was watching you, both with the Transformers and then ultimately with the video games, is with the Transformers, you had an imagination that you made up some kind of stories or whatever those Transformers ended up being and doing, that it created something within you. I think all of us have to have something within us that's an imagination that helps us to see, even when others cannot see. And then the games, the things that I appreciated about the games, even though they were for me kind of mindless, and I don't do games. The things that I liked about the game, it was that the ones I liked getting you were the ones that had levels to them, which meant that it took you a while till you could get to a certain level, which I hope you as a child would understand that you don't solve it immediately.
Right.
You don't play the game and then you become, so I mean, me, I go back to Sega and and
Nintendo.
And had the tennis where it's just a little dot that went across and you had to put your little paddle.
Right.
So it wasn't a lot to figure that out. But life is about figuring things out.
Sure.
That we don't come with all of the answers.
Right.
That we have to get that. When you're looking at, because I was as you were talking, I was thinking about this conversation that Jesus has takes place in Caesarea Philippi. There are all kinds of people that are there in Caesarea. And when you look at the group that he's talking to, I am sure that his mother probably questioned some of the friends he's hanging around with. I mean, so when you look at it, one's going to betray him, one's a tax collector. They're not the ones that you would choose. Are there people in your life that when you consider as friends, is it a diverse group of people? Are there people of whom you consider that somebody might be shocked to say, y'all friends?
No. I think who I consider to be my friends, like I said, that list is small, and we're kind of peas in a pod. And this may be a downfall of mine, that I don't have a diverse list of people that I call my friends. I have some women and some of course some men on that list, but they're all black. They're all around my age. We hung around the same circles when we were growing up, and kind of around the same circles now. So it's kind of, I don't make new friends often. So the people that I started out, when I as a young man transitioning into an older man, that the people are still the same. The people that I consider my friends have not changed since high school.
Okay, so with that then, how do you continue to grow in those relationships?
Well,
I would hope that you are not in the relationships that you had when you made some of these early friendships as a teenager.
Sure.
I hope they're different than they are now that you are.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. And so how do you renew that so that that your friendship does not get stale?
I think you have to stay connected. There are some people that I was really close with as a teenager that as we got older, we just started to be interested in some different things. We started living life a little differently, and so that kind of allowed us to grow apart. And I don't look at them any different, but we just our lives don't mesh in the same way. We don't see the world through the same lens in that aspect of it.
So I thank you, because that adds another piece, I think, for Sunday, and I think it particularly adds another piece as we think about our relationship. Because when I hear Jesus ask that question, "Who do you?" while we only hear Peter's answer, and Peter gives the answer, and that I think for Matthew is writing. But of all of the things that I think about Jesus, I think of Jesus as being a very personal relationship. That Jesus' relationship with the 12, he had a different relationship with all 12 of them. And that each one of them came out of their particular need of what happened, as they moved along, and what they needed to strengthen. I hope that you have enjoyed the conversation. I know I had enjoyed the conversation with Trey tonight. I ask that you just continue to be in prayer for all that's going on in the world. The COVID-19 is still very real. We ask that you continue to pray for the Nelson family, who recently lost a loved one, and we have several members who have dear friends who have recently tested positive and who are going through. It's very real. For those of you of whom are still staying at home, we hope that somehow that being able just to hear the voice has been comforting for you. For those of you who are coming in, it is always a pleasure to be able to see you. We're practicing social distancing and within our worship experience. But most importantly, I just want you to know that it's about community. It's about caring for one another. It's about reaching out, finding ways to be able to reach out, ways to be able to keep connected. And this is just our way of being able to keep connected to you all. So thank you, as I say, for tuning in. Keep one another in your prayers. Continue to practice. Continue to keep safe. Take care of yourself. Wash your hands. Do all of those things that we have. Because while there are some who want to downplay what's happening in the world today, between this pandemic and between the division that exists within the world, and now is a time that we really need to ask ourselves the question, who is this Jesus? Who is he to us? But more importantly, who is he to ourselves? So thank you, and God's peace be with you.